Welcome to the first installment of our CCCM seminar series on tech and democracy, a series, as you now already know, that concerns itself with all things computational and their intersection with democracy. We're kicking off the new year with Taha Yasseri, who's an associate professor at the School of Sociology at University College Dublin, Ireland, where he's moved to from previously being a research fellow at Wilson College at the University of Oxford, and also the Oxford Internet Institute, and also holding a fellowship at the Alan Turing Institute for Data Science. Taha has interests in large-scale transactional data, experiments, is interested in government-society interactions, mass collaboration, collective intelligence, opinion dynamics, and collective behavior, and we'll see where that takes us today. So the format of the talk is going to be, as our other seminars, there'll be a 30-minute presentation by Taha, and that will be then followed by a panel that will discuss the material together with Taha in more detail. Jason, if you want to introduce our panelists.
Yes, so in addition to Taha, we have two panelists today who are well positioned to comment on the work being presented and who will help lead the discussion after the talk. So on today's panel, we have Philip Lorendsbreen, a research scientist at the Max Planck Institute Center for Adaptive Rationality, and Caroline Wiesner, an associate professor at the University of Bristol's School of Mathematics and an external faculty member of the Complexity Science Hub in Vienna. And so with that, I'll just invite Taha to share his screen or get started.
Thank you very much for a great introduction, for having me. I think you need to give me some access to some privilege to show my screen.
The screen sharing. All panelists can share. Okay, should work now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me today. It's a great honor and privilege to be able to present today to you, and also thank you to my panelists who agreed to be part of this. It's also quite an honor to be able to talk about some of the work that I've been doing in the past few years in Oxford, and more recent things that are recently published, or some ongoing projects. Primarily, I'm looking forward to get feedback and comments from you in order to improve. So the title I chose for today's talk is the double-edged sword of online politics. And when I was actually preparing the talk, I noticed I'm talking about four edges, as if there are two swords, each of them has two edges, double-edged swords. And then I realized that wasn't a great title. Maybe I should have gone for something which has four aspects, two of them perpendicular to the other two. Anyway, let's get on with the talk itself. I'm building on a book that we published, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, titled Political Turbulence, co-authored with Helen Margetts, Peter John, Scott Hale. And I'm going to give you some overview of some of the things that we discuss in the book. Obviously, I cannot cover it all in 30 minutes. And then I'm going to also talk a little bit about some recent publications. But the subtitle of the book, hopefully, I get to introduce you to the title towards the end of the talk, but to start with, let me just clarify that the subtitle of the book, How Social Media Shape Collective Action, contains two terms that we use rather liberally. When we talk about social media, we are basically talking about internet platforms that allow users to generate content. A more accurate term might be Web 2, where basically, as opposed to Web 1, that is a static, one-directional medium, Web 2, which was the term coined in 1999, is digital platforms where there is bidirectional interaction, and most of the content is actually produced by the same users and visitors. And by collective action, again, loosely defined, we talk about any activity that is undertaken by citizens with the aim of contributing to the public good. With this definition, is editing Wikipedia a collective action? Yes, because you edit Wikipedia because you think that it's social public good and you want to add to that. So in that sense, the arguments that I'm going to present today could be generalized to more than just Twitter and more than just elections, if you like, and I hope. What is happening now? When you, again, we were just talking about the differences between Oxford and UCD and how the time scale is different in these two universities. Also, when you talk about politics, depending on whom you talk, is it a UK-based political scientist or an American political scientist, the time scales are quite different. One thing that I learned, and I'm not a political scientist, talking to British or UK-based political scientists was that you have to argue, and still you have to argue about the role of social media and the data. It's not granted that this is something that matters and something that stays around for long. There is a resistance against giving enough attention and importance to the revolution, if you like, that is happening in the way that we are living and the way that we are doing politics. A growing number of people are spending growing amount of time and a larger amount of activities on social media and internet-based platform, both in terms of political activities as opposed or next to or along with all sorts of other activities. And the interesting bit is the data that these activities are generating due to the digital nature or intrinsic features of the technology. That's one aspect, that's one of the sides that we have a lot of data. But on the other hand, and that is even more difficult to argue with more traditional political scientists about, is that politics is changing. You know, the way that we are doing politics, the concepts such as mobilization, democracy, look very different now compared to even 10 years ago. So the interesting thing, however, is that the very same technology that is changing politics is providing us also with data and tools that we can study the very same change. So that's a kind of positive paradox here, that as we are experiencing these changes, we can also study and observe the change and ourselves and how we interact with this technology. How much of that observation and how much of this possibility is being utilized is an open question, but at least the potential is there, and we can ask ourselves that how can we use these new forms of data to find us more about the changes in politics. Again, this part of the slides and things that I'm presenting today might sound a little bit old-fashioned, but I thought I can start from there and bring it up to what we talk about today. But again, a few years ago, you had to explain that, you know, all the different things that we do online could be considered as social or political participation. You know, is liking a picture on Facebook political activity? Well, yes, it is, because numerous cases, these tiny acts of participation, liking a picture, retweeting a tweet, could or have built up to larger scale socio-political phenomena, leading to you know, things as big as revolutions or emergence of a new party, complete change in the political atmosphere of a country. Without going into the details, you know, what happened in the past 4 or 5 years in the US, what happened in the same time period in the UK, a lot of new turbulent patterns emerged in the past 5-10 years of politics, most of it driven or at least influenced to a great extent by the tiny acts of participations that are happening on digital platforms. There are some more kind of some bigger acts of participations, signing an online petition, which is more explicitly considered a political activity as opposed to liking a funny image that has some political content in it. But it has been shown that there is great connection. People who have shared a tweet talking about a petition are much more likely to actually sign the petition. And then depending on the country that the petition is signed for, in many cases, these petitions have led to bigger debates and in a few cases, even massive changes in policy. Yes, sorry, this was what I was just talking about, that there is a great connection between the tiniest acts of participations on social media and then bigger and bigger acts that might be even going to a demonstration, gathering on the street and demanding certain things. So we give this the ladder of the term that we use is the ladder of participation. And again, to you guys, this might not be a big surprise because I think we have a very open-minded and futuristic group of audience today. But I have a quote here from someone at the Public Administration Select Committee who strongly believed that only about 20 years ago, that people who have nothing else to do but to type something on the internet or click on something, these people are not really activists and this cannot lead to any meaningful political change. This notion has been challenged quite significantly over the past few years. Numerous examples that I don't even need to explain. These pictures, these images that show across the countries, across different continents, young democracies, emerging democracies, or even very well-established democracies have experienced massive changes, mostly driven or influenced by social media. So I have this badger here. You might wonder, what does have this one to do with what I'm saying? Well, well, most of you probably live in the UK and know badgers are the topic of badgers is a political topic, particularly if to call them, if to get rid of them or not to, depending on which side of the debate you are. The petition on the UK website about the call of badgers has been one of the most successful ones. This diagram shows the number of signatures over time for, I think, about 20,000 petitions that were created on the UK website. And, in the UK, if you create a petition and you manage to collect 10,000 signatures, the government has to respond. Well, could be negative, but there has to be a formal response. And if you manage to collect 100,000, then there will be a debate in the House of Commons, and then your cause, your petition cannot be easily ignored. So there could be massive consequences. But what is interesting about the case of badgers is that we managed to find 3 petitions on the website, more or less about the same time, that have very different levels of success. They are all about the same thing. The wording is even similar. They're created by different people, but they ask the same thing. And one of them only collects about 10 signatures. The other one are a bit less than 1,000. And one of them has more than 100,000 signatures. Sorry, the numbers are here, 15, 3,000, and 300,000. And you wonder what is happening here. Why? Because it's not about the content, it's not about what is being asked, it's about probably who asked it, or the person who asked it, where in social network that person is, how many people, the person who is creating the petition, how many people managed to collect, how many people within the first hour or so, how many people tweeted about this petition, how many people retweeted, and so on. We analyze all sorts of obvious reasons, the wording of the petition, the time of the day of the week. We couldn't find any obvious reason for the massive difference that we see in the success level in these 3 cases. And that was the beginning of a lot of mathematical analysis that I'm going to show you a little bit of today, to see if we can actually make any predictions or at least understand the shape of these curves. As you notice, all these curves start increasing very rapidly, particularly the ones that increase at the end, the successful ones. But even not very successful ones, we see that most of the signatures come within the first few hours, this accessing hours. And then, after a couple of days, nothing happens. These curves flatten at the occasionally, only very rarely increase in time. Majority of them show no change after a couple of days. Here I have the successful ones, the ones who made it more than 10K and 100K. Again, this is 30 days, a month. Majority of them have reached that final number very quickly. And that's a bit counterintuitive, because at least the website suggests you keep your petition live for a year. And if you are old enough, like myself, to remember pre-internet petitions, the ones that you are offered to sign in front of Tesco on a Sunday or in the high street, you see the same guy for about a year. Every weekend, they come to the high street and ask you to sign a petition. And eventually they might get somewhere. But what we see here is a very different dynamics that is very sudden, very quick. And if you measure something that we called outreach factor or novelty factor of a petition based on these curves, you see that the average outreach factor decays very quickly. Within 10 hours, it almost reaches 0. And the data that we have here is both for the UK and US petitioning websites. Eventually, if you want to describe this finding, it says that if you don't collect enough signatures within the first 10 hours, probably you will never manage to collect any meaningful number of signatures. The first 10 hours, the first day, the first couple of days are extremely important for the success of an online or an internet-based petition or collective movement. There are exceptions, of course. For example, this one here, you see that for about 300 days, there were only about 10 signatures, but then something happens, and then there is a massive jump within few days to about 30, 40,000 signatures. But again, in itself, this massive jump is explosive. You don't see the typical, S-shaped curve that is being used very often in more traditional political science to describe a collective action. Whenever there is an increase, it's more explosive and more like a massive jump that has a very short time scale. This is not limited to petitions. I have images of YouTube videos, the number of views of different YouTube videos, different countries, different causes. Again, they all show either the single explosion curve, or in this case, because of a secondary event, a double curve, but each of the curves looks, again, similar. Here are the number of mentions on Twitter and Facebook, the mentions of important hashtags related to different political mobilizations. Again, the same patterns are quite evident. Well, this diagram didn't age very well. There were 2 petitions on the UK website about Trump, and one of them was asking the government not to let him visit the UK. The other one was asking the government not to ban him from visiting the UK. Completely opposite requests. What is interesting is that the curves look very similar. So this explosive pattern is not limited to the topic, certain topics or certain ideologies. You can see the similarity between 2 opposite petitions here. Again, a lot of signatures within very short time period. It's hard to talk about politics and not to bring up the B word. This is the Brexit petition, which was interestingly initiated first by the Leave campaign, because they were worried that they're not going to win the referendum, and the petition asked the government to rerun the referendum if the margin is smaller than 4%, I guess. Well, we all know what happened in the referendum. A couple of days after the referendum, the Remain campaign rediscovered the petition and that led to the emergence of the most popular or most signed petition ever in the history of the UK. Well, again, we all know that there wasn't ever any second referendum, but as far as the curve is concerned, we see the same pattern. So that's about the dynamics. Very quick, very fast, and novelty decays very quickly as well. When we talked to the government office who runs the petitions, they gave us access to the web analytics of the website. And then we could see how people end up on the website. About 50% came through Twitter, and about 30% came through Facebook. So 80% of people arrived to petition website through social media. And then that made sense out of the sudden, because who goes and checks tweets from 3 days ago? It's history, right? It's too old. The time scale of feeds on Twitter and Facebook is reported to be, one of them 9 hours and the other one 14 hours. Anything older than that is already old. So that fits very well with what we see here, that things are quick, fast, and they lose their novelty very quickly. But then let's talk about the success. As you noticed in this diagram, majority of petitions never get anywhere. In these 20,000 curves that you see, only 20 of them make it to more than 100,000 signatures. If you look at the distribution of final number of signatures and how many petitions have that final number, you see the typical fat tail distribution. Very few petitions, a handful of them, receive a lot of signatures, and then thousands and thousands of them receive very little number of signatures. The difference between US and UK that you see here is because of the different design of the website. In the US website, petitions only become public if they have already 100 signatures. So because we collected data from the public pages, we couldn't collect the ones with less than 100 signatures. But nevertheless, we see that the two curves are parallel, both giving the same message, that on this very open, very organic system, we see the typical scale-free or fat tail distribution of success, with few having a lot and a lot having very few. If you're not that much fascinated with log scale here, I can show you the linear scale of the same curves. The green is the actual statistics of the number of signatures and how many petitions of that number of signatures we have. The red curve here is a normal distribution with the same average. And we see how big is the deviation to a normal distribution. And that is very important because, again, most of the models that we have for mobilization and collective action is based on normal distribution and classic statistics, whereas we see that the underlying distributions are very different. What does it mean for democracy? Because that's the question, right? Well, it seems to be that, in a way, online platforms are more inclusive and more open, more pluralistic. Anyone can tweet something, anyone can initiate a collective movement. But on the other hand, they are very unpredictable, and the success of a movement is very rare. And even the ones that are successful are not necessarily stable. The best example is the Arab Spring and some of the revolutions that happened in certain countries in the region where, for many reasons, maybe for the lack of a leader sometimes, the movement was not very sustainable and very not as stable as you wish. So the message that I'm saying here is that, in theory, we have an open and pluralistic opportunity here, but in practice, only very few can gain. And those few are not even easy to predict. So in practice, we might not have much of openness when it comes to online platforms. Right, but then what happens to all those 19,800 out of 20,000 petitions that never get anywhere? Well, they become digital dust. They remain on the website for a while and then they get archived. And all the signatures to them are also lost. So that's why I wrote something for LSE last year, arguing that, you know, we have to analyze the not like unsuccessful petitions. They could be as informative as the successful ones. Of course, it's easier for the politicians to, or policymakers to look at the top 10 or top 20, and it's impossible for them to look at the 18,000 that didn't make to the large numbers. But then I'm sure most of you are familiar with lots of techniques that we have today and lots of computational tools that could easily read thousands of documents in few minutes and analyze them and extract the most important things from them. One of these tools is topic modeling. And now I'm gonna show you some of the results from this paper that was recently published in Policy Sciences. In this paper, we looked at a different period of time in the UK. We called it time of chaos. That's the 2015 to 2017 parliaments, you know, between the general election and then the 2017 election. So during this period, these are the most successful petitions, but again, let's not talk about them. Let's talk about all the other petitions. And to be able to talk about them, we used topic modeling, which is an unsupervised machine learning approach or algorithm that analyzes the text and extracts the most frequently co-occurring bundles of the words. Well, let's call them topic. I'm not gonna go into the details, but imagine that you can find groups of words that often appear together in a document. It's very easy for the computer to make the statistic and find those groups. And then the researcher can sit down and annotate them by looking at the words. For instance, when we see these words are bundled together and they appear in certain documents together, you see that they are all related to international affairs. This group, school, children, student, education, year, young, these are all about school. So you can do the annotation and then go back and ask the computer, ask the machine to assign each petition to one of these topics, or as we call them here, issue. You can also look at the relationship between these issues, because it's not that one petition is only talking about one of these issues. Often we see that a bit of overlap because people write the text of a petition as they wish. So you can look at the connections between these different issues and how often they appear together on the same document. Let me move a bit faster to the geography. This map shows the number of signatures coming from different constituencies in the UK. We see a big deviation, of course. And even when you divide the signatures per electorate in each constituency, you see that still there is a bit of variation. It's not that for a given number of electors, we have a certain number of signatures. It varies quite a bit depending on the region and the density and the size. Actually, if you look at the level of participation, number of signatures, per population of the constituency, you see that there is a superlinear relationship. That means that if a region has a population twice as big as the other region, the number of signatures not only is twice as big, but a bit more. Basically, the number of signatures per person increases with the size of the population of the region. And that is understandable because more dense regions probably are related to more urbanized, higher education, higher income, and higher political participation. Well, that's the overall picture. When you look at the distribution of those topics that were generated by topic modeling per different regions and different areas, we see that again, quite a bit of difference between how different topics are signed from different regions. This one shouldn't surprise you because, as you know, the school matters, the education in Scotland is separated from England. But even on topics that are supposedly national, we see that the density of signatures varies quite a bit between different regions. You can create clusters of regions or constituencies that often sign the same petitions together. Okay, something a bit similar to the clustering of the words that we have done to extract the topics. Here we extract collections of regions that often act together. And we see that some easy to explain separations appear, like Scotland and the rest. Sorry, I'm not. The urban area, the rural area, the north, the London and the rest divide. And then when you look at the topics versus geographical clusters, again, you see that the distributions are not homogeneous. Let me summarize what I'm trying to say here is that it matters where you live in terms of the topics that you care about and the topics that you're ready to sign a petition for. And all these analyses computationally are very easy to do. And what I was suggesting in that blog post was that policymakers could benefit from these computational methods to have a real-time ongoing observation of the issues that matter to the people who they are representing. We compare the topics to the Ipsos survey. You know, they call about 1,000 people every month and ask them what is the most pressing topic in the UK as far as they are concerned. We see that a lot of these topics appeared on the Ipsos list as well, but a couple of them were missing. For example, animals and nature did not appear on Ipsos survey. Probably people were too shy to say that I think animals and nature are the most important topic in the UK at the moment during 2015 and 2017. They thought if I say that, probably I will be considered as an ignorant person to Brexit, international affairs, and so on. But when it comes to petitions, we see that, well, it appears as one of the topics and one of the important topics. Particularly, we see a lot of signatures coming from people who live in rural areas that have signed a petition related to animals and nature. So the suggestion here is that we have to utilize these possibilities to understand what citizens want and how to respond to them the best. Let me quickly talk about a few other things that I won't have time to go into the details. Just to wrap up, social information is important in our behavior. The amount of influence we receive from others based on the information that we have of their activities. And that's not new, but it is much more important in online platforms because we are bombarded with information about what other people are doing. You know, this video has been viewed this many times, this tweet has been retweeted that many times, and no matter how much self-control you have, we are influenced by those numbers, and we are much more likely to support a cause that we think is already popular. Even when the government changed the design of the website to introduce the trending e-petitions, the ones that have been successful in the last hour, we see that the Gini coefficient of the signatures, the amount of inequality between signatures given to all the petitions within a day, has increased significantly. That means that the popular petitions have become much more popular, and all the rest have received less and less signatures. So, and that can only explain by the fact that people arriving to the website were encouraged to sign or focus their signatures into a smaller number of petitions by showing them the trending ones. I have another diagram which shows that the overall number of signatures actually doesn't change before and after the introduction of new feature, but the Gini coefficient changes significantly. Different people are influenced by social information differently, and that has to do with their personality rather than their demography. That could be the reason that polling is not working anymore. In the past few elections in different countries, pollsters failed miserably because the methods that they use is based on demography. Whereas it turns out that online politics, at least as long as it's concerned, has more to do with personality traits. It is much more important if I'm extrovert or introvert than my skin color or my education level or my income, at least today. And that could explain why someone like Trump, against all the odds, receives a lot of support from, for example, Latin Americans or from demographics that would not traditionally support him, because we argue in online politics, personality matters more than demography. Not only we see other people on online platforms, other people also see us. We are visible to others. And believe me, visibility is very powerful. We do crazy things as long as we know that people are watching. We might even do this and take a video and put it on Instagram, even though it's very unpleasant, but well, people like us. I mean, literally like us on Instagram, and that could be a massive driving force. There are not leaders on online movements. The evidence is massive, but most appalling to me is the interview. The demonstrations in Brazil a few years ago before the Olympics, when the government said, "Okay, fair enough, send us your leaders. We want to debate with you." They couldn't find any leaders among the massive numbers of people on the streets, because it is very difficult to find a leader when it comes to online movements. Finally, and that is also very important, it turns out that when it comes to online activity, we are very much driven by the cause rather than by the affiliation. I can be pro-Brexit or against Brexit no matter what party I'm voting for. I can be pro-climate actions or against climate actions or climate change denier, no matter what is my political activity. There might be some correlations, but it turns out that when it comes to online activity, the cause comes first, the act comes first, and then comes the affiliation and identification. We analyzed people who tweeted petitions, and we detected different communities. The communities were not following necessarily party affiliations. The communities were very much centered around the causes and around the actions rather than parties. That could suggest that maybe we are reaching the end of the party system. And again, remember, Trump was not supported by his party, Jeremy Corbyn was not supported by his party, and they managed to mobilize Bernie Sanders. They managed to mobilize a large number of supporters. Let me wrap up, and I apologize if I took a few more minutes. When it comes to online politics, tiny acts of participation appear, and they matter because they can scale up to larger scale mobilizations very quickly. Well, most of them fail though, and participating in online mobilizations, we are very much influenced by social information. We are very much influenced by visibility. There are no leaders. Institutions and organizations are not necessarily playing the most important roles. Mobilizations are unstable and unpredictable, and there is higher volatility in electoral politics. So we bundle all these observations in the term of political turbulence, borrowing from complex system physics and turbulence studies and chaos theory, where unpredictability is a core concept. Here is more formal definition of a turbulent system that is unpredictable. It has high sensitivity to initial conditions because of the nonlinear relationships and interconnectivity. However, the best example I remember when I was undergrad student in physics, the best example of a turbulent system was the weather. And they keep saying that weather is unpredictable. And I remember I was thinking, but weather is predictable because, you know, I watch TV and they say it's going to rain tomorrow, or they say next week there will be a hurricane. So we can make predictions. Of course, we cannot predict the weather 2 years in advance, but no, we have very good models and very good computers and a lot of data that enable us to make rather good predictions, at least about tomorrow and next week. Well, maybe we can do the same in politics now, because we have a lot of data, we have good models, and we have good computers. We might not be able to predict when is the next French Revolution, but we might be able to predict and to observe when the level of dissatisfaction in a certain region or in a certain country in relation to a certain cause reaches a threshold. Thank you very much.